What's going on, everybody? Happy Saturday. In this video, we are looking at the Prizepicks plays for NFL Sunday tomorrow. Let's go ahead and get started. As always, if you enjoy the videos, appreciate it. Hit the like button for me. Subscribe if you haven't already. You can check out the website if you want to join us. Link is down below in the description. Twitter is there as well, where you got hit with some news already today with Michael Pittman being ruled out. That opened up a lot of value on the Colts side because Alec Pierce already been ruled out with a concussion. So, we're looking at like Doolin's a decent value, but I prefer Campbell. Both guys are cheap. You got some tight ends that you can look at. Mo Alley Cox, but also think Grayson looks good as well. So you got some options there, and then it's a lot easier to pay out for like Taylor now that we have those value picks. Just for a quick side note before we get into the price picks for DFS. I'm sure we'll get more news once we get the Tampa Bay side stuff, but let's go ahead and give you guys some price picks for tomorrow. I got 5 that I like. For the Thursday night one, went 3 of 4. Hit on Herbert over fantasy. Hit on Mike Williams over receiving yards. Missed out on Travis Kelce over receiving yards. And we hit on Clyde Edwards-Helaire over receiving yards. Today I got 5. Some fantasy score props. I got a kicker in here as well that I like. So let's get started. Antonio Gibson. Looking at his fantasy score. Just by typing in Gibson here, we see all of the props that we have available. I do think he can probably get into the end zone. His rushing or receiving touchdowns at 0.5, so you can catch one, get in there. You can also get it from the ground. If you look at the snap counts for him last week, he did play a majority, as to be expected. We'll see how things shake out once Brian Robinson returns, but he got the lion's share at 64% snaps compared to McKissick, who was there for mostly passing situations, and that's probably going to happen. But Gibson also had a really good game catching the ball out of the backfield, and now he gets to face off against the Detroit Lions team that gave up over 200 yards rushing to the Eagles, as well as 4 rushing touchdowns. So half a rushing / passing touchdown looks good. Like his fantasy score. I like his rushing yards as well. He got 58, but he also had a bunch of receiving yards, and his receiving yards doesn't have one there. But if you look at his rush and receiving, it'll be like 25 is all we need if you take his rushing plus subtract that from his rushing and receiving. So you can look at that prop as well. But I'm taking his fantasy at 16. He had 20 last week without even getting into the end zone, and there's opportunities for a touchdown this week, as even chance to get multiple touchdowns against the Lions. It should be kind of a sneaky shootout type of game. You have 2 pretty poor defenses, and you got 2 offenses that are up and coming, especially the Washington Commanders offense looks good with the wide receiving core, and they got a couple of good playmakers out of the backfield. On the Detroit's, they got some good weapons there with St. Brown and Swift, and once Jameson Williams makes his return, that's pretty formidable. So that's the first prop I like. Another fantasy rushing prop I like is going to Denver. I'm looking at Javonte Williams. If you look at his props, we have 16 also first fantasy, which I like, taking the over there. If you look back at his week 1 against the Seahawks, even though Russell Wilson threw for 340 plus yards, some of that did go to Javonte Williams. He had his biggest game ever in terms of catching passes out of the backfield. He had double-digit targets and double-digit receptions as well with 11 for 65 yards. He also lost a fumble, which took away some fantasy points, but he still was able to hit the over. Last he got over 20 still, just because of all those receptions, and he only got 7 carries, so you expect him to get more carries this week. If we look at, and he also has a very soft matchup against the Houston Texans, they gave up a ton of rushing yards last year, and week 1 they gave up a boatload to the Colts, especially most of that was from Jonathan Taylor. But looking at this Denver team, expect them to, as the season goes on, to give more and more work to Javonte Williams. I mean, this guy is a beast. He breaks tackles like nobody else in the NFL at times. He's great in the open field. He played 58% of the snaps. He got 38. Melvin Gordon got 27. Hopefully he gets similar amount, if not over 60 this week. But in a pretty good matchup. Also, both guys were great in week 1 without even getting to the end zone. Expect them to probably get touchdown opportunities this week, given the matchups and given that both teams should score some points, especially the Broncos with going up against the Texans and having a very high total. So once again, you can look at his over half a rushing / receiving touchdown. His over 20 receiving yards looks very good as well after having 11 catches last week and I mean, rush attempts, he had 7, week 1, 13.5 is a pretty big number. That could be one where you look at the under. Rushing yards, I like the over, even though he missed it last couple games, but last week he only got 7 carries. He still was very good yards per rush with over 42 yards and just 7 carries, so like 6 plus yards per carry. Those are 2 running backs that I like. I'm loving both of these guys for DFS this week, so might as well use them on Prizepicks. Another prop that I like is a receiving yards prop, and we're going to another guy that I love this week for DFS, and he's probably will have a huge game just playing in front of his family. That's Devonte Adams, who is at 92.5 receiving yards. I like his fantasy score prop at 22. Even his receptions look decent just because he's going to get targeted so much, and he got almost half the team's targets last week, but you can also take his receiving yards at 92.5. It's pretty low for a guy that if he continues to get over a dozen targets and continues to get 7 to 10 receptions a week, and with the big play upside that he gives you at times, I like it. Going up against Arizona, they got torn apart by the Chiefs receiving core and Mahomes, and Derek Carr, though he did struggle with some interceptions against the Chargers in week 1, they should still be able to move the ball against the Arizona defense in the secondary, and a lot of that's going to be through Devonte Adams. They're going to build and play through him all season. Another fantasy score prop that I like for a wide receiver is in Arizona, just because they are very banged up with some guys, with missing some players. Andy Isabella is not going to play this week. And they're missing Hopkins still with his suspension, as well as they are not going to have Rondale Moore for a second straight week. So it's going to be relied on Connor out of the backfield to have a good game. It's going to be relied on Marquise Brown to make some plays and see if both of these guys have fantasy score props once we get to them. Here they go. So 16.5, you have James Conner. He got a rushing touchdown. He's going to be, once again, have a big game with touchdowns. Marquise Brown's at 15 fantasy. He had a decent game just because he got a late touchdown. But the guy that I like is going to be Greg Dortch. He's at 10 fantasy. He kind of got lots of opportunities because of Rondale Moore not playing and with the suspension of Hopkins, and Isabella didn't play as much, but now that you take him out as well, Dortch is a guy that had a good preseason, which is why he got the job, and he's going to get a lot of playing time until they get back to full strength, and he played more snaps than AJ Green in week 1, so that's a great sign just for his role for the next few weeks. Looking at the snap counts for them, Marquise Brown played 62 snaps. He played 95%, but Greg Dortch was not far behind with 59 snaps and 91%. And in what should be a high-scoring game, opportunities for possibly touchdown for these receiving core guys. Even if he doesn't get into the end zone, he can still get his fantasy score just with the targets that he should get in the yardage, just because they only have like Dortch, Brown, Connor, Ertz. Like, those are the guys that are going to make plays. They don't really have too many other options, so I feel pretty good about it. Murray's rushing yards like 29.5. You can possibly take the over there if you wanted to. And then last pick that I got for you guys is a kicker prop, and this one I like quite a bit. I think it's throughout the season, this one is going to get bumped more and more, at least until they get their starting quarterback back in Deshaun Watson once he makes his return. But we are talking about, might as well just type it in, just because a lot of players to shift through, but we're looking at York, kicker for the Browns, who had isn't it York? Oh yeah, there it is. Cade York, 7.5 fantasy score. He had the game winner for them. He was the only kicker, I believe, drafted in the NFL draft, and he followed it up with a perfect game and the game-winning kick, 58-yarder against the Panthers. Even without that kick, he was still at 11 fantasy. And they're going up against the Jets, so they should still be able to move the ball against his defense. Should get some opportunities if they do get touchdowns. But also with Brissett as the quarterback, a lot likely that they might be stopped when they get into like the opposing team's 40 or 30-yard line. So it's likely in my mind that there'll be a lot more field goal attempts with Brissett as a starting quarterback until Watson comes back. And York at 7.5 fantasy against the Jets. I like this a lot. He has a great leg. They will give him opportunities to kick 50-plus yarders. So that could be very easy, get 5 points that way. But even if he gets between 30 to 40 yards, still get those 4 points there. So Katie York over 7.5 fantasy. Greg Dortch over 10 fantasy. Devonte Adams over 92.5 receiving yards. And then 2 running backs that I really love this week. Gibson over 16 fantasy and Javonte Williams over 16 fantasy. That's what I got for you guys for price picks tomorrow. There's a ton of props. Let me know what other ones you guys like, what you guys feel about these ones. And I will see you all next time. Best of luck. And stay tuned for more news.